My husband and I, the perfect lawyer couple with thriving careers and a rock solid love, thought nothing could shake us until his ex girlfriend burst into tears in the middle of the party. People say the past is behind us, but sometimes it's just waiting for the right moment to come back and test you. I had no intention of going to that reunion with Hunter's old friends. A pile of legal documents still sat untouched on my desk, numbers and contracts I needed to review before Monday. Besides, these kinds of gatherings, old friends reminiscing, those lingering glances toward someone they used to secretly like, I'd had enough of them. Showing up would only make me a backdrop for someone else's old story. I shook his head, eyes still on the laptop screen. You go by yourself. I've got work. Hunter stood leaning against the doorframe of our home office, hands in his pockets, that familiar half smile on his face. Attorney Hale only thinks about work, never her husband, but still talks so sweetly. The brightest star of Hale Consulting. His voice was warm, a little teasing, but his eyes were soft, almost pleading. Come with me, just for a little while? Just a couple of hours, I paused my typing and looked up at him. That smile, still the same one that sparkled the first day we met. I sighed, closed the laptop, put my work aside. It wasn't that urgent anyway. Then changed clothes and followed him out. I didn't expect my own words to come true. The reunion was held at Austin Country Club, where warm yellow lights glowed over expensive suits and evening gowns. The air smelled faintly of luxury perfume and polite laughter. But as I walked into the grand hall, my arm linked with Hunter's, my eyes landed on her. Maddie Pierce, my husband's ex. Maddie Pierce, Hunter's high school girlfriend. Back then, they were the golden couple. He was talented, she was beautiful, a love story admired by the whole school. After graduation, Maddie became an influencer, her face popping up on Instagram with thousands of likes, while Hunter buried himself in law books to earn his JD. Everyone said graduation was the season of goodbyes, and law school devours time like a hungry beast. Hunter couldn't give Maddie weekend dates or long phone calls. She quickly had a new boyfriend, rumored to be the son of the CEO where she worked. I'd never asked Hunter if it hurt. He wasn't the type to dwell on the past. Whenever her name came up, he'd just shrug and say calmly, "Everyone makes their own choices." I always thought that was his way of closing a chapter. No resentment, no regret. But now, seeing Maddie standing there alone in the crowd, I wasn't so sure. She looked thinner, her golden hair flowing naturally, light makeup highlighting her sharp blue eyes. Still beautiful, still captivating, as if time had only made her more alluring. I glanced over at Hunter. He was carefully cutting the steak on my plate, his movements slow, focused. Then he looked up, met my gaze, and smiled. That gentle smile I'd loved for the past 7 years. The party grew livelier with each round of wine. The laughter got louder, the conversations drifted. From high school memories to million-dollar deals and social connections. People in their 30s, dressed to impress, exchange business cards with the finesse of those well-versed in society's unspoken rules. Old friendships were now just an excuse to expand their network. Maddie was the only one sitting alone in the corner of the room, her slender figure curled up under the dim club lights, visibly unsettled. She had lived shielded by wealth and fame for years, probably unfamiliar with these calculated small talks. A former classmate, dressed sharply in a suit with a glass of wine in hand, walked up to Maddie and said with a smirk, "I heard the school beauty Maddie married rich. Too bad you didn't bring your husband tonight. Us working-class folks were hoping the capitalist prince might throw us a bone." Maddie stayed silent for quite a while, her eyes fixed on the floor before she lifted her glass and downed it in one go. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and when she spoke, her voice trembled, as if each word carried the weight of her pain. "I'm getting a divorce." The classmate froze, his smile turning stiff, clearly embarrassed. He stammered and quickly placed his glass on the table. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. About you two." The room slowly quieted down. The earlier chatter faded away, leaving only the distant sound of background music. Tears began to stream down Maddie's face, smudging her delicate makeup. Her expression was full of sorrow, her shoulders trembling. "It's my fault for not seeing clearly, for marrying the wrong man. I have no one to blame." A woman nearby, probably another classmate, rushed to hand her a tissue. Maddie took it, wiped her tears, and between halting breaths, told her story. Her husband had cheated, was addicted to gambling, financially abusive, and had full control over their shared accounts. She wasn't even allowed access to their money. A beautiful woman in tears always stirs sympathy. The group of classmates grew indignant, murmurs of anger spreading like waves. "What a jerk! You need to leave him." Another voice chimed in sharply. "Exactly! Maddie, get a really good lawyer." Instantly, someone turned and pointed at me and Hunter. "Don't the Hales run a law firm? You've got a top-notch lawyer sitting right here. Why worry about getting justice? That capitalist should lose a fat chunk in the divorce." Maddie's eyes lit up. The crying slowed, and she glanced over at us with a flicker of hope. I turned to look at Hunter, too. He remained calm, his face composed, but his grip on my hand tightened slightly. He spoke in a low, steady voice, tinged with coldness. "My wife specializes in divorce cases. If you need help, you can ask her for a consultation." The atmosphere dipped further, the background music sounding even more distant. Maddie bit her lower lip and stared at me for a long moment, her eyes deep with hesitation, before she finally spoke, her voice still shaky. "I've heard of Attorney Hale. Would it be too much to ask if I could get your help?" I felt a small pang of regret. Her situation was painfully clear and all too common. Those upper-class marriages, where love is just a thin veil over pre-written legal agreements. Second-generation rich boys might fall blindly in love, but the generation before them always stays sharp, planning ahead to protect their wealth. These days, even the wealthiest families use that tactic. They may let a woman into their world, let her live in luxury, but they can also kick her out at any time. Everything done legally, cleanly, without a single loophole. I chose my words carefully, trying to remain objective as I analyzed her current situation. "You can keep the gifts, but you should request alimony or a lump sum settlement. Use his financial abuse to your advantage." Maddie's mouth dropped open in surprise, her eyes wide as she stared at me. I pointed at the rare Hermes leather bag on the chair beside her. Items like jewelry, clothing, or high-end fashion usually aren't considered marital property in a divorce. They're presumed to belong to the woman. Maddie's expression suddenly darkened, shifting from hope to cold fury. She stared at me with eyes full of bitterness and asked in a low voice laced with resentment, "So, Attorney Hale, what you're telling me is all my youth, all my sacrifices, boil down to just a few purses?" I was taken aback by how quickly she grasped the heart of the matter, but I nodded, my voice firm. In elite circles, legal planning like that is entirely normal. Maddie stopped looking at me and turned to Hunter, her gaze sharp as a blade. "Hunter, is that what you think too?" Hunter froze, his grip on my hand tightening even more. I had to use quite a bit of strength to pull my hand free, a tingling numbness spreading through my arm. With his legal background, Hunter definitely understood the situation even better than I did. True to form, he chose silence, just gave a slight shrug, eyes cast downward. Seeing this, Maddie let out a cold laugh, tinged with bitterness and anger. Then she grabbed her bag and stood up abruptly, her movement sharp and defiant. Maddie, may not have a brilliant career like Attorney Hale, but I'm not pathetic enough to trade years of love for a few handbags," she continued, her voice rising, eyes sweeping across the room. Attorney Hale, let me ask you. Today, you advise me to turn love into assets. What's next? Will you suggest I have a few kids to make more money? If this is what a famous divorce lawyer is, then Maddie, don't need one. Thanks to Maddie's little performance, the reunion ended early, people awkwardly saying their goodbyes. The drive home from the club was still quite a distance. Even with clear roads at night, it took nearly 20 minutes. Hunter sat in silence the entire time, hands resting on his lap, eyes staring out the window. I glanced sideways. His eyes were half closed, but the furrow between his brows was tight. It was the same look he had whenever dealing with a tough case, when his mind was racing with arguments and evidence. I understood. Tonight's events would stir up waves in anyone's heart. Once we got home, I went to the office to catch up on work. Hunter didn't follow like he usually did. Instead, he quietly went to the bedroom, and the door closed behind him with a soft but heavy sound. I didn't care. Act 3. Until the sharp sound of shattered glass echoed through the living room, slicing through the silence of the house, I stepped out of my office and saw Hunter standing in front of the wine cabinet, deep red liquid spreading like a crime scene, the sharp smell of sour wine filling the air. I frowned. That much of a psychological reaction, huh? Hunter's motion of picking up the shards paused. He was kneeling with one knee on the floor, a piece of glass in his hand. He looked up at me in surprise. "What?" I said flatly, voice cold. "Maddie." He didn't respond, just lowered his head and kept picking up the pieces. But I saw his shoulders stiffen as if her name had touched an old wound. A rush of anger flared inside me, hot like fire, spreading from my chest to the tips of my fingers. Today's situation wasn't just about him having a right to be upset. Those cryptic comments Maddie made before leaving had annoyed me too. So I spoke coldly. "Hunter, I told you I didn't want to go, but you insisted." "You were the one who told Maddie to come ask me." Hunter looked up, his bloodshot eyes tense, his voice low but tight. "True." "But Savannah, did you really have to say it like that?" I froze, standing stiff in the living room, honestly wondering, what part exactly was too harsh? The things I said to Maddie, or this conversation between us now? The air grew heavy between us. Hunter rubbed his forehead, massaging his temple with tired fingers, his voice softer now, tinged with reproach. "Savannah, you're smart, always calm, like someone on the outside. You could tell right away it was a hopeless case. But have you ever thought about Maddie's feelings? As the one going through it, how much she's suffering from a broken marriage. Did you really need to rub salt into her wound?" He even looked me dead in the eye, that gaze intense and endless. "Savannah, where's your empathy?" I actually laughed. Out of sheer fury. Years of work experience kicked in, and my reflexes snapped. "Hunter, let's be clear. I wasn't the one who ruined Maddie's marriage. Instead of standing here lecturing me about so-called empathy, maybe teach her how to use her resources wisely. If she understood anything about tools and leverage, she wouldn't be in such a pathetic state." I kept going, voice rising slightly, full of sarcasm. "And another thing, when it comes to legal planning and asset protection for high-end clients, you, Hunter, know it better than anyone. What, you didn't think the day would come when those same strategies would affect your ex?" Hunter's face twisted, clearly not expecting me to go that hard. His lips pressed into a thin line, cheeks slightly flushed. Anger or shame, I couldn't tell. He instinctively opened his mouth, voice faltering. "Savannah, I didn't mean it like that." I sneered, unable to hold back the biting words. "Then what did you mean? Do you still believe that in this day and age, a marriage certificate alone can split the wealth it took generations of a family to accumulate? Or should we go to court and try to put a price tag on her years of love and youth? Hunter, what exactly are you angry about?" He stayed silent for a long time, just standing there, arms slack, finally letting out a deep sigh. I watched him carefully wrap the glass shards in leather cloth, slow and deliberate, then mop up the spilled wine, the scent gradually fading. Once everything was cleaned, he walked over and hugged me, his arms warm but slightly trembling. "I'm sorry, Savannah. I know everything you said is true. It's just, I felt sorry for her. But in the end, it was her choice. It's not anyone else's fault I didn't argue with Hunter any further. First, because he had genuinely apologized. Second, I never believed my husband was perfect. Maddie had always been part of his past. Whatever the reason they broke up later on, the good parts of their love didn't just disappear. Time may have passed, people may have changed, but those memories, sooner or later, become a kind of treasure buried beneath the dust of time. I allow Hunter to keep that treasure. After all, we are emotional creatures. Even with everyday objects, the longer we use them, the more sentiment we attach, let alone someone we once loved deeply. If I were in Hunter's position tonight, I'm not sure I could have stayed unaffected either. And Maddie truly did evoke sympathy. I'm a woman too. I understand the pain and despair of being betrayed by someone you love. I also respect her decisiveness and strength in choosing divorce when her marriage had already rotted, when she could have chosen to overlook the betrayal and keep enjoying that life. In fact, that very resolve mirrors something inside me. When I first entered the legal field, I had no right to choose cases, just bowed my head and took whatever file I was assigned, pouring myself into the work, nights spent at my desk with cold coffee. Later, as my career advanced, I slowly earned a voice, earned the right to say no, the right to choose. That was when I truly began walking the path of a divorce lawyer, witnessing so many lives falling apart, so much pain. Of course, before everything breaks, I still believe every relationship is worth taking seriously. Take Hunter, for example. He's tall, warm, sharp-minded, and a great cook. At over 35, he still goes to the gym regularly, abs firm under his dress shirts, his whole presence radiating energy and vitality. He really is my type. And this marriage, at least for now, is still worth holding on to. Days passed in peace. Hunter and I went to work as usual. Sometimes, if we finished early, we'd catch a movie together, or he'd roll up his shirt sleeves and cook a fragrant pasta dinner. Maddie felt like a side quest in a video game, one that popped up unexpectedly, flashed across the screen, then disappeared without a trace. At least that's what I thought. Until 2 weeks later, when her name resurfaced. It was at a small gathering with friends. One of Hunter's old classmates, swirling his glass of wine, casually brought up Maddie, sounding intrigued. She and her husband have been fighting like crazy lately. Used to be all over social media flaunting that peaceful lifestyle. Now she only posts depressing stuff. Like she's dying or something. He paused, glancing at Hunter. "Oh right, Hunter. What did she mean by saying you two gave her the cold shoulder? Wasn't she the one who lashed out at Savannah for no reason that night?" I froze, my fingers tightening around my wineglass as I looked up at Hunter. He was pouring wine from the bottle, slowly, but paused for a moment when he heard the question, as if weighing how to respond. Then he pulled his phone from his suit pocket, unlocked it, and showed it to me, speaking plainly. "She sent a few friend requests." I didn't accept. I glanced at the screen. 5 pending requests from Maddie. The first message was just the default system template. The second, "It's Maddie." The third, "I need to ask you something." Clearly, Hunter ignored the first 3. The fourth, her tone sharper. "Are all lawyers this arrogant?" And the latest one read, "I was emotionally triggered that day. Please tell Attorney Hale I'm sorry for causing trouble." I looked at Hunter, voice calm but tinged with doubt. "And you didn't respond?" He lowered his eyes, tapping his finger lightly against the table, voice even. "Not necessary." I nodded, took a sip of wine, the bitterness trailing down my throat, thinking the matter was over. But I was wrong. A few days later, my law office received an uninvited guest, Maddie Pierce. After wrapping up a meeting, I walked out of the conference room and saw Maddie standing before the gallery wall in the hallway. The framed photos captured Hale Law Group's journey, from its founding days to landmark cases, portraits of practicing attorneys, and a glittering array of awards. Her gaze slowly scanned each caption, each photo, like she was reading a book. At last, her eyes locked onto one image, Hunter's portrait, placed prominently, with a list of prestigious awards beneath it. The ceiling lights made his photo appear almost lifelike. I stood behind her for several minutes, but she didn't notice. Not until I spoke up, cutting straight to the point. Ms. Pierce, is there something I can help you with today? Maddie turned quickly, her blue eyes gleaming under the lights, curving into a soft smile. Attorney Hale is so sharp. Can you guess what I came for? I raised an eyebrow, voice steady. This is a law office. Obviously, it's about legal matters. The smile in her eyes gradually faded. She stepped closer. Her deep rose-pink slip dress clung to her figure, a stark contrast to how plain she'd looked at the reunion. Today, she was radiant, commanding, every move exuding confidence, her perfume rich and heady. She looked me directly in the eye, voice low. Correct. But let me ask, do you handle all the divorces here yourself? I leaned back against the wall, silently observing her without breaking eye contact. Divorce isn't that complicated. The facts are clear. The goals are straightforward. I replied evenly. Anyone on that wall you were just admiring could handle your case well. Her gaze sharpened. What about Hunter? I pointed toward the hallway. Hunter works across the hall. But he's in a meeting. You'll need to wait. Maddie tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a faint smile on her lips. Thank you, Attorney Hale. But I already booked an appointment with the receptionist. I nodded, said nothing more, but a ripple of unease began spreading in my chest. At 4:30, Hunter returned to the office. The receptionist must have briefed him, because when he saw Maddie, he showed no visible reaction, just gave a slight nod, like greeting an old acquaintance. He came to me first, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, and said warmly, Savannah, give me a few minutes. We'll leave at 5, okay? I nodded, remembering we had plans for a 6 p.m. movie, one of our rare, relaxing evenings. Maddie followed him into the office. For client confidentiality, consultations are usually held behind closed doors. I noticed Hunter hesitating, his hand lingering on the doorknob, and in the end, he left the door slightly ajar. Voices floated out, mostly Maddie's, fluctuating in tone and emotion, with occasional short questions from Hunter, his voice calm and professional. I didn't pay much attention, used the time to catch up on unfinished tasks at my desk. At exactly 5 o'clock, the office system chimed to mark the end of the workday. I looked up. His door was still open. Colleagues packed up and left, their chatter fading. The cheerful receptionist popped in, smiling. Savannah, should I order dinner in case you're staying late? I smiled and shook my head. No need, I'll be leaving soon. By 5:30, the door across had been fully shut, no more sliver of openness. Through the frosted glass, Maddie's pink dress flickered like fire. At 5:40, I grabbed my bag and drove to the cinema. Hunter didn't show. During the entire screening, my phone kept vibrating with texts and calls. I turned it off. The world around me fell silent. Only the film's soundtrack echoed in the dark. As I left the theater, I followed the crowd streaming out. And then I saw Hunter at the entrance, his tall frame standing out among the crowd. His eyes scanned through people until they landed on me. Worried, searching. He rushed over, voice urgent. Savannah, I lost track of time. I called, but couldn't reach you. I rushed over, but they said I was 20 minutes late and wouldn't let me in. So, I waited out here. I caught the faintest trace of perfume on him. Subtle, but potent enough to make me uncomfortable. Swallowing the heat rising in my chest, I cut him off coldly. Go home first. Hunter opened his mouth to respond, but my eyes stopped him. We walked to the car in silence. No more words, only the sound of the engine humming into the night. Act 5. Hunter had taken on Maddie's divorce case, but the moment we got home, he rushed to explain. Maddie asked me to represent her in this divorce. She told me everything that's happened these past few years. That's why I was late for the movie. He paused, eyes fixed on the wooden floor, like he was searching for the right words. Then he stepped closer, his voice soft but slightly cautious. But Savannah, if you're not okay with it, I won't take the case. The anger surged in me again, burning hot like fire flaring up from my chest. I stared into his eyes, unable to hold back, my voice sharp and cold. You reek of her perfume! Hunter froze, then quickly replied, a bit flustered. Her heel broke. I caught her. I'll shower now. He hurried toward the bathroom, leaving me standing alone in the living room, the scent of perfume still lingering in the air, like a reminder of her presence. I clenched my fists, trying to suppress the rising discomfort inside me. 2 days later, at the law office, a girl from admin brought over a thick stack of contracts to be stamped. I glanced at the pile, and right on top was Maddie's contract, but the section for the representing attorney's name was left blank. I raised an eyebrow, keeping my voice calm. This file's already been signed. The girl nodded, replying quickly. Attorney Hunter said he'll fill it in later. She hesitated a bit, then added, voice a little unsure. But her side already paid the attorney fees. I nodded, saying nothing more. That afternoon, Hunter specifically made time to find me, walking into my office with his tablet, screen lit up with notes on the case. He sat across from me, face serious, voice low. Savannah, she can't drag this out anymore. She needs someone firm to lead and get it done, once and for all. I looked at him, a faint smile spreading across my lips, my tone edged with sarcasm. Wow, Hunter. Didn't realize you were not just a lawyer, but also a magician? He blinked, eyebrows furrowing, surprised. Huh? I let out a laugh, joyless. Did you even read the file? The company, the properties, they're all under her parents' names. Even her husband just gets scheduled payouts from a trust fund. Thankfully, Maddie quit working after marriage, or she'd be stuck giving him half her income too. If she's still willing to throw big money at a lawyer for this case, then maybe you really do know magic. Hunter's face instantly paled, like cold water had been dumped on him, his eyes shimmering with confusion. He looked at me, voice softening to almost a whisper. Savannah, I haven't signed anything yet. If this really bothers you, I can hand the case over to someone else. But I promise, I know my boundaries. It's strictly professional, his words repeated in my head. It started with, if you don't want me to, I won't take it. And now it's, if you're really upset, I'll pass it on. The difference between the two didn't need explaining, especially when he emphasized that I had to be really upset, as if I had to prove my emotions in a courtroom. I waved my hand. Just joking, don't take it personally. The client's already paid. If it needs signing, go ahead. It's still revenue for the firm. Hunter nodded, but his eyes remained cautious, like he was trying to read my mind. After that, Maddie started showing up at the office frequently. At first, she still greeted me politely, but after I tactfully turned her away a few times, her smile faded, replaced by a short nod from a distance, before she turned and walked straight into Hunter's office. I looked up, through the frosted glass, the door across the hall firmly shut, like a wall between us. I could vaguely hear Maddie's fragmented laughter, dragging out the last notes, shrill and grating on the ears. I stood up and walked into the meeting room for our regular staff meeting, forcing myself to focus on work. After reviewing the monthly case summaries, a colleague asked, Savannah, where's Mr. Hale? I wanted to ask for his input on a case. I replied briefly, he's busy. She said, ah, and then smiled brightly. Savannah, that case you handled recently was incredible. I read the verdict. The guy didn't get anything at all. It's honestly one of the cleanest divorce wins we've had. I nodded and smiled. That one was a textbook case. I'll compile it and send it to the group later. The colleague beamed. Thank you. I really want to learn from it. Just then, the meeting room door swung open. Hunter walked in. What are we learning about? Savannah, a meeting without me? The room suddenly buzzed with energy, but I caught his eyes glancing toward me, carrying a hint of hesitation. A coworker smacked her forehead playfully and laughed. Savannah said you were busy. Then she added excitedly, we were just going over some of Savannah's top cases. Oh, but Hunter, you just took on a new divorce case too, right? Maybe you two could compare notes. Hunter paused for a split second, his gaze locking on mine like he was searching for some kind of signal. I curved my lips into a small smile, my voice light but laced with irony. Attorney Hunter's case must be tricky. Might not be the best example to learn from. Laughter echoed through the room, but Hunter's eyes remained fixed on me, as if he was still trying to decipher what lay behind my smile. Maddie's divorce case was indeed stuck. What I didn't expect was that Hunter came to me for help. After so many years together, we'd often shared and discussed uncertainties in our cases, working together to find better solutions. But ever since Maddie's case began, those serious conversations had vanished, replaced by a heavy silence. Today, he stood in front of my desk, his voice hesitant. I read that case you shared in the group the other day. How did you do that? How did the husband end up giving up most of his assets? I looked at him, my eyes full of implication, the corners of my lips curling into a faint smile. Why? Maddie wants to copy that tactic? Hunter instinctively furrowed his brow, the deep crease between his eyebrows showing clearly, his voice lowering with a hint of irritation. Savannah, you don't have to be so sensitive. It's just work. If I were a doctor today, would I let an ex die just because she was an old flame? And besides, I did ask for your opinion first. I paused for a few seconds, my fingers tapping lightly on the desk. Then I spoke slowly. Divorce cases aren't like other lawsuits. They're born from emotion. At their core, it's a psychological battle of the heart. Hunter's gaze settled, as if he'd just picked up on something. You mean, appeal to emotion? I looked him straight in the eye. I mean, if you play the right emotional card at the right moment, it might just have a surprising effect. Something seemed to click in Hunter's mind. His eyes lit up, and without saying another word, he stood up and quickly walked back to his office. I looked up at the window. The night sky that had looked so peaceful earlier now stirred with wind, trees rustling loudly in the darkness, as if warning of an oncoming storm. The branches outside shook violently, like memories being swept away by the wind. A heavy rain was coming. Everything was about to shift. Not just out there, but within my own marriage. Maddie's case suddenly made progress. Word was, her husband had relented and agreed to a sizable settlement. When Maddie returned to the law office, her complexion was glowing, radiant. She came to find me directly, her voice ringing out with a hint of triumph. Attorney Hale, you lost! I just gently brought up a few memories with my husband, and he got so emotional he agreed to the payout immediately. I couldn't help myself, my voice dripping with sarcasm. So he couldn't part with expensive gifts, but he also couldn't let go of old feelings. Or did you just recycle some old tricks to soften him up? Maddie froze, her smile stiffening, her face darkening, and her gaze turned sharp as a blade. There's no need for you to mock me. After all, people are just fundamentally different. She paused, took a deep breath, then continued, her voice low but full of meaning. Some people, no matter how many tricks they use, end up with just a few handbags and dresses. But others, some people are simply born to be loved. Even after the breakup, they're still irreplaceable. With that, she gave me a look filled with pity, her eyes gleaming as if sizing me up, then turned and walked straight toward the office across the hall. Hunter's office. But life isn't always smooth sailing, is it? Maddie's husband, Lucas Pierce, suddenly showed up at the law office. The receptionist, wearing a professional smile, led him to Hunter's office. When the door was pushed open forcefully, Lucas froze on the spot, his face instantly pale. Maddie, in a thin slip dress, was lounging comfortably on the sofa, barefoot, her legs stretched out, high heels tossed carelessly on the floor. Her coat was draped sloppily over the side of the chair, wrinkled. Hunter, meanwhile, was dressed neatly in a perfectly pressed suit, sitting in front of the computer, but nothing about the scene looked remotely professional. Lucas took one glance and saw through everything. His expression darkened, his eyes turning cold. He let out a sarcastic laugh. "Now I get why you wanted a divorce." Turns out you already had fresh prey lined up. Colleagues quickly began to gather, the sound of footsteps filling the hallway, and in no time, the entrance to Hunter's office was surrounded by curious and concerned faces. Hunter's face turned pale too. He slowly stood up, his voice firm but slightly shaky. "Please, this is a law office, not a place for your outbursts. If you keep speaking nonsense, I'll sue you for defamation." Maddie immediately regained her fire. She sat up, her messy blonde hair falling around her face, lifting her chin to reply coldly, eyes flashing with fury. "Lucas, not everyone's like you, cheating and betraying in marriage. There's nothing going on between me and Attorney Hale. He was working. I was tired, so I lay down to rest. What right do you have to slander us?" The murmurs among the colleagues grew louder, like ripples spreading. "That's right. Attorney Hale and his wife are super close, and her office is literally across the hall. Would he really risk that?" Another chimed in, skeptical. "Seriously? Cheating right under his wife's nose? Who'd be that reckless?" And someone else whispered, "Besides, if a lawyer gets caught in a scandal with a client, their whole reputation is ruined." "No way, it's not possible." Lucas turned to me, narrowing his eyes, voice sharp as a knife. "You're his wife?" I nodded, voice calm but firm. "We've been married for 3 years. He's always been a good husband. And the scene you just caused has seriously damaged our law firm's image. I ask that, once the truth is clarified, you publicly apologize to my husband and our entire firm." Hunter glanced at me, his eyes flickering with confusion before quickly looking away. Lucas challenged, "And how do you propose to clarify it?" A colleague eagerly stepped in, voice charged like they were solving a case. "Our office is fully professional. All emails, messages, appointments are legally archived in the firm's system. And we have cameras." Hunter's expression changed dramatically. He stood frozen. "Since when have we been archiving?" I smiled gently at him. "Just recently." The firm upgraded its system. He stood there stunned, his face draining of color bit by bit, as if all the blood was leaving his body. "No one told me. Why are we suddenly recording everything?" I kept smiling, my tone light. "The legal industry's tightening up. Everything needs to be transparent and compliant now. So, we archive everything. Must have slipped someone's mind to tell you. But it's fine. Now we can use it to prove your innocence." A colleague quickly brought over a USB, plugged it into the computer, their voice excited. "I've copied all the footage from Attorney Hunter's office. Gotta say, these new cameras were worth every penny. Not only is the image sharp like HD film, but there's facial recognition and person-specific video filters. From the moment Maddie first stepped into this office to her lying on the sofa today, every second has been recorded clearly." On the screen, Maddie appeared in that dark pink slip dress, gliding into the room with the grace of a dancer. The moment she saw Hunter, her eyes turned red, and she began pouring out her marital woes. Then she threw herself into his arms, wrapping him tightly. Hunter didn't reciprocate, but he didn't push her away either. He simply stood there, letting that vivid pink figure cling to him. Maddie finally snapped back to reality, but her face was pale, eyes wide in panic. She screamed, her voice breaking, lunging toward the computer in a desperate attempt to shut it off, her trembling hands grabbing at the screen. "Don't watch! You're not allowed to watch anymore?" But Lucas, her husband, with a cold and stormy face, shoved her hard with one arm, causing her to stumble. His voice was full of fury. "You whore! Still denying you're cheating? You think I'm stupid?" The colleagues glanced at each other, eyes flickering between shock and curiosity, but no one dared to intervene. They just crowded at the doorway. The video kept playing on the screen, the cold blue light casting harsh shadows on everyone's tense faces. On screen were actions, not overly explicit, but filled with suggestion, like a story told through moving images. No sex, but plenty of intimacy. Maddie sneaking touches to Hunter's hand, one-sided hugs, her body leaning against his, and the climax. Maddie suddenly rising on tiptoes, her red lips brushing lightly against Hunter's cheek, a brief but pointed kiss. Hunter didn't kiss back, but he didn't pull away either. He just stood there. And it was precisely that kind of half-hearted resistance that made it worse, giving the whole thing the feel of a silent film loaded with subtext. The murmurs from the colleagues grew louder. "Is this real?" Attorney Hale, who's always calm and professional, sneaking around under his wife's nose. "That's wild," another whispered, doubt heavy in their tone. "I always wondered, why didn't that case go to Attorney Hale? Why did he take it personally?" Maddie collapsed onto the sofa. She sobbed uncontrollably, her cries fractured and gasping. The once glamorous makeup on her face had turned into a smeared mess, mascara and blush blending into long, dark streaks down her cheeks, like a ruined oil painting, messy, chaotic, and stripped of all beauty. I kept my expression frozen, bit down on my lip, shook my head faintly, as if I couldn't believe what I'd just seen, then turned and walked back toward my office. Hunter staggered forward, trying to compose himself, but his voice shook, and his eyes were full of panic. "I'm going to sue you!" He pointed at Lucas, trying to reclaim the composure of a lawyer, but his trembling hand betrayed him, stripping away the usual confidence he carried. Lucas scoffed, a mocking smile spreading across his face, voice low but full of challenge. "Go ahead and sue. I can afford a lawyer. Actually, my family has its own legal team. I'll have them contact you," and before leaving, he casually snatched the USB from the desk, his fingers clenching it like he was about to crush it, then walked out of the office. Hunter stayed home for an entire week. But even so, he didn't stop texting me. Since that day, I had moved out of the house. I sat at my desk, staring at my phone screen, reading the messages from him, his words pleading, full of regret. "Savannah, I didn't cheat. You have to believe me. Maddie and I were just, but I swear I didn't do anything that would betray you." I kept reading. I know it was wrong, really. I had already thought it through. Once her divorce was finalized, I was going to cut it off completely. He paused there, probably trying to think of more ways to justify himself. "It's just, I didn't expect things to blow up like this. I truly regret everything. I'm sorry, Savannah." But of course, the domino effect didn't stop there. It spread like an uncontrollable chain reaction. The Pierce family acted with incredible speed, like a precision machine, without the slightest hesitation. Within just 3 days, they had neatly compiled and edited all the ambiguous emails between Hunter and Maddie, lines filled with intimacy and insinuation, organized into what looked like a full criminal file. They even dug up the history of their past relationship from when they were young. At the same time, their legal team sent an official demand letter, and simultaneously, a video was leaked online by an anonymous account, the title blaring in bold red, "Sensational and Ruthless." Shocking! Top attorney Hunter Hale caught cheating with a married client. The video spread like wildfire. All that can be said is, when it comes to the wealthy, they truly are in a league of their own. Not only did they have a professional legal team, but they also knew how to fight on every possible front. Act 10. When I sent out the emergency shareholder meeting notice, I knew everything was about to end just as I had planned. I walked into the conference room with a calm expression. Colleagues glanced at me, eyes full of curiosity and subtle pity, but I didn't care. I sat at the head of the table, hand resting lightly on the file folder, waiting for the storm to come. This time, all the shareholders and top executives showed up, more complete than ever before. Shiny black suits, stern faces. Normally, they'd find excuses to skip meetings, politely declining by email. But today, they were all here, like they had gathered to watch the final act of a tragic play. Hunter sat at the corner of the table. The shareholder representative slid a stack of documents toward him, and I didn't need to look to know. The old contract, violations highlighted in bold, and an invoice for damages. He skimmed through it, fingers trembling as he turned the pages, then looked up at me, as if suddenly realizing I was there, eyes full of confusion, pleading. One shareholder spoke up, voice icy, emotionless. "Attorney Hale, have you seen the video currently circulating online? Engaging in an improper relationship with a married client is a direct violation of professional ethics and legal conduct. You've caused irreparable damage to the firm's reputation. Effective immediately, you are stripped of partner status. We will be pursuing damages as outlined in the agreement you signed." Hunter looked at me, eyes begging for something, but I gave him nothing. No sympathy, no heartbreak, no anger, only clarity. Cold clarity. What was he hoping for? A reassuring glance? A forgiving nod? One last defense. When did things start to shift? Was it at the class reunion, when Maddie showed up with tearful eyes and a loaded gaze? I saw it from the very first second. Not because I was jealous, but because I knew him better than he thought. He's not swayed by beauty, but he's moved by memories. By the feeling of, once upon a time, someone loved me that much. I remembered asking him, "Hunter, what exactly are you angry about?" My voice had been calm then, but it was a test. I asked to make him hear the contradiction within himself. He declined Maddie's friend request. He missed our movie night. And he lied to me. Did he think I didn't notice? No, I knew everything. Maybe he regretted it later, but I gave him no chance, because that chance had ended the moment he told his first lie. After the shareholders left, the conference room slowly emptied. I was the last to rise. I pulled the divorce papers from my file, my signature clear at the bottom, and placed them in front of him. Hunter stared at the document. "Savannah, when did you start to suspect?" I tilted my head, tapped my fingers lightly on the table, and replied evenly. Probably around the 5th time you declined Maddie's friend request." His eyes were red, but the corners of his mouth curved into a bitter smile. His voice trembled. "Savannah, so you never trusted me from the start." I looked him straight in the eye. "Then Hunter, can you tell me why you didn't dare accept Maddie's request?" That's right, didn't dare. Psychologically, avoidance is rooted in fear. And Hunter's fear came from knowing deep down, only by keeping distance from Maddie could he avoid betrayal, avoid temptation. But he failed. I chose to drag the fight into the light, while also preparing myself for the collapse. Hunter's eyes welled up. He lowered his head, burying his face in his arms. I heard him choking back sobs, his voice trembling as he begged, "Savannah, this was a trap. You set me up. You can't do this. I could have saved this marriage. I really could have. Savannah, you're so cruel." He suddenly stood and grabbed me tightly, arms wrapped around me with desperation, voice shaking as he pleaded, "Savannah, please don't divorce me." I swear I never slept with her. I never crossed that line. In the end, I couldn't hold back. I shoved him away. What came after was simple, just the legal procedures. Because of our professions, Hunter and I had signed a very clear prenup. Financially, we were completely independent. So when it came time to divide assets, everything was surprisingly easy. The only unclear item was the house we lived in. He paid for it, but it was registered in my name. I had suggested selling it and sitting down to divide the proceeds, but he insisted on leaving it to me. "Savannah, after everything, I hurt you." I didn't refuse. I wasn't Maddie. When a man's guilt can be converted into actual money, I see no reason to pretend. I accepted it like a fair settlement. That day, just as I stepped out of the courthouse with the divorce decree in hand, he suddenly called out to me from behind, his voice hoarse. "Savannah, tell me, if we hadn't gone to that party that night, wouldn't things have been so much better?" I kept walking, didn't look back. There's no such thing as what if. What followed was no surprise. Hunter was officially fired from the law firm. That short video, though it was only online for a few minutes, spread like wildfire, becoming instantly infamous, circulating throughout the legal community. Whispers and side glances followed him into every corner. His personal reputation was completely destroyed, and in the end, no law firm dared to take him in again. Interviews were canceled, doors slammed shut in his face. Honestly, it made sense. Every profession values reputation. I glanced at the breach of contract fine, and with Hunter's recent years of income, that penalty alone would wipe out his entire savings. As for Maddie, she had planned to walk away with a generous settlement, thinking that after the divorce, she wouldn't have to worry financially. But the Pierce family struck back, cold and swift. They kicked her out without hesitation, cut off all financial support. This time, she really walked away with nothing. Her once glamorous social media feed slowly dried up, leaving behind only faded echoes of a lavish past. And me, among the wreckage, I started over with small, simple, and free acts of daily life. Every morning, I brewed a hot cup of coffee and sat by the window in my new home, small but warm, looking out at the little garden, where yellow flowers swayed gently in the breeze, like a quiet reminder of resilience. I gave myself longer afternoons to stroll along the familiar streets. The law office still ran, but now I chose to take on cases that brought hope. Divorces that weren't just about dividing assets, but about protecting women, helping them rise from ruin and reclaim their voice and their freedom. In the office, I sat across from women whose eyes were tired but strong, listening to their stories, from the sting of betrayal to the quiet desire to begin again. I picked up my pen, taking notes carefully, each word a step toward helping them win back not just money, but dignity, independence. Each successful case, each relieved smile they offered, became a brick in the foundation of my new career, not just as a lawyer, but as a defender, an ally. I know that every woman who walks into my office carries a story, and I am here to help them close one chapter and open another, peaceful and whole.